Brouwerij Conteras, Valeir Donker.
And remember, life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Good evening. I'm trying to fucking think of a new way of introducing my videos, because every single video I've done so far it says welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews, which is pretty fucking boring if you ask me. I was going to think of a lot of greetings to put at the beginning. I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm just going to say welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews, because I can't really think of anything else. So that's going to be that. So with that out of the way, let me introduce this stuff. This is the Valeir Donker, and it comes from the Brouwerij Conteras. Now, just one thing I want to make clear on this bottle. I had a real hard time, and I'm a senile old git, I know, so you got to excuse me on that one, but I had a real hard time finding out which brewery this came from. And if you have got better eyesight than me, let me get my ugly boat out of the way. If you can read that, I had to take a photograph of that, and I had my bins on as well. I had to take a photograph of that to work out where the brewery was. I don't know whether they don't want people to know who they are, or they're just fucking giving it the big one, trying to be ironic. And do you know what? I'm just looking on this label now. I've just noticed it. It's got a date on here, 1453. I don't know where that comes from, because I read the history of the brewery and it doesn't mention anything about 1453. This sort of dates back to the 1800s. It was founded in the early 1800s, and it was a farm. And the farmer was also a brewer as well. And I think he sold his business, I think in the 1920s, certainly after World War One. And that's the modern, well, not the modern, but the brewery that you see now, the Valeir. I think Valeir was the name of the person he sold it to, or the family name of the person he sold it to. So I don't know what's going on with that, but we are where we are. Maybe they should make their history a little bit clearer. It is written down, and it's, to be honest, it's quite... That's Percy there, by the way. I don't know what the fuck he's doing. The history is a bit... I don't know, it's a bit of a mishmash and vague. It may be translated, or the translation that's making it sound like that. But yeah, it's what... Percy, what are you doing? You're interrupting me, you little git. He's looking at me as if to say, what the fuck do you want? Come up here. Come on. Say hello to everyone. Get off, you. I know where that tongue's been, and I know you've just been licking, and it ain't pleasant. He's quite happy up here. What do you think of this, Perce? Good? Bad? He's licking the bottle, so that might be a good sign. Yeah, this is a real sort of... It's one I picked up off Beers of Europe, and it was relatively cheap. So I'm just looking. I've got a little monitor here. I'm just looking at his head, and it looks like a little rugby ball when I pick it up. It goes like into an oval shape. Can you see the oval shape, Percy? You got a head like a fucking rugby ball. You know that. you can't reshape it. Is that what you're trying to do? Oh, you got an itchy eye. He does that. I don't know what the fuck's going on, but he keeps licking his paws. I don't know whether it's his dew claws need cutting or what. But stop trying to... He started twerking in front of me now as well. I don't know what the fuck's going on there. I think he's trying to seduce me. He's already he's already had a go at Bob. Oh, am I boring you? Am I? Okay. Anyway, enough of Percy. Let's get back onto this beer. This is, as I say, the history of the brewery. It's a bit vague and a bit wishy-washy. So I'm not really going to go into it too much. Maybe the next beer that I brew from this, if this is a brew, maybe the next beer that I review from this, if it's a good one, I'll give you a bit more of a history on that. But it's a bit of a sort of potted history that really doesn't make sense. What are you doing? What's the matter with you? He thinks he's a cat. He's seen the cats doing it, so that's why he does this. He licks his paws and then he washes his face. He's a fucking idiot. You don't know what you are, do you? Eh? It's a Donker. So what is a Donker? Well, that is a dark beer, and the hops in this are quite interesting. I'll get onto that in the next section. But Donkers and Bruins, or Bruins as it's known, they are very similar. I really can't tell the difference between the two. They're both genuine Belgian beer styles. Donker, of course, in Flemish means dark, quite similar to the word dunkel in Germany. So the style of beer is obviously a dark beer, and it's one that I really like. Now, this is bottle conditioned. There's a secondary fermentation in the bottle. That's quite common in a lot of Belgian beers. They put the invert sugar, which they call candy sugar, in there, which is basically beet sugar. Beet sugar is quite common in Belgium, certainly in Belgian brewing. And I remember reading a history of World War One. You're right, yeah? I remember reading a history of World War One, and a lot of battles took place around sugar refineries, and it was all beet sugar that they were refining. Now, obviously, that wasn't for beer. Well, some of it may have been for beer. Do you know what? He's resting on my hand. He's such a lazy little git. What is the matter with you? And it's quite common in Belgium. So, and they use it in the beer quite a lot. I'm going to put you down, Percy, because you're not literally, but I'm just going to put you down on the floor because you weigh a fucking ton. It's quite common, and they use it quite a lot for the secondary fermentation. One of the byproducts of that, though, is a lot of carbonation, and I've come a cropper quite a few times with opening up secondary fermentation beers from Belgium. They've gone everywhere, so I do now open them up with a little bit of caution. But I'm quite looking forward to this because, as I said, dark beers, Donkers, quadruples, doubles, I really do like that style. The Belgians do have a lot in common with the British when it comes to brewing. In fact, they import quite a lot of British hops, or English hops I should say, because there's no hops that grow in Scotland apparently. That's a fact. It was news on me, and hence the reason why the Williams brothers brew heather beer. That was it, Frock, is it? Oh, that's fucking vile stuff, that is. Disgusting. But the Belgians do import a lot of our Goldings, the East Kent Goldings, and other good hops for their own beers, which with beers like this, it does give it a very sort of, I wouldn't say very English character, but a bit of an English character, if you know what I mean. Percy, can you be quiet? I'm trying to do a beer review here. Can you? No, not a blind bit of fucking notice. You're going to have to excuse that noise. That's him down here. Anyway, let's stop treading water and let's investigate this beer. Right, this is a 330ml bottle. It's 6.5%. It is a Donker. Now, I said I would tell you about the hops in this. The hops are interesting. You've got Saaz hops, which are a noble hop. Usually from the Czech Republic. You find them in almost every Czech beer. It's their speciality, and it gives the Pilsner, Czech Pilsner, that characteristic bitterness, that grassiness that you get, and it's a definite characteristic of Czech beer. The other two hops that are used in this are German noble hops. You have got Hallertau hops, which is a bit of an ambiguous term, really. Hallertau is a region in Bavaria. It's the biggest hop growing region in the world, certainly in Europe, and I'm pretty sure the world. Maybe some of the American hop fields have taken that over now, but in Europe, certainly, it is the biggest hop growing region. And not only that, but there is a lot of research done on hops as well. It's very impressive, and it just goes to show how serious the Germans take their brewing. And the final hop that's in here is Mittelfruit, and as the name would suggest, that is quite a fruity style hop, and it's used in quite a few German beers, but it's not that common, I will say that, but it does originate from Germany. The malt in there, I don't know. They didn't mention what the malt was, but I can imagine it's the usual 2-row stuff that roasted malt that they use in these style beers. A lot of that characteristic, I think, is going to be overtaken by the candy sugar that's in this, so I wouldn't read too much into what hops have gone into this unless it's one of them beers that they really have worked on and come up with a really good product. So let's stop guessing, let's stop gassing, and let's get this beer open. Right, as I said before, I need to open these with caution because and very slowly as well, because when if the pressure equalises too quickly, the whole lot just foams up, because there is a lot of carbon dioxide in here. There is yeast sediment in here as well, which again, like British brewers, there's the cap, it's just plain black, there's nothing to see. With British brewers, they say not to pour the yeast in. I tend to pour that in. I don't see the point of not pouring it in. Maybe it's because, I don't know, it's a traditional thing over here. You don't like floaters in your beer, and you certainly don't like cloudy beer, or you never used to like cloudy beer, but that seems to be coming in vogue now. So I'm going to ignore that until I find out for definite from a brewer, should I or should I not be drinking it. I know it's dead yeast basically, and it does tend to form at the bottom of the glass. You do see that in wheat beer quite a lot. That looks really nice. That's a dark ruby colour. You can't really see it here, but maybe if I held it up to the light, can you see that? No, I can see it. It's very ruby in colour. What are we getting on the nose? Very sweet. Sugary sweet. There's that candy sugar that I was talking about earlier. There is some fruity notes on there as well, like dark fruit, almost like Christmas cake style. Black Forest Gatto, cherry, dark cherry, a little hint of vanilla as well. But it's a cross between caramel malt, sugar sweetness, and dark fruit. And it's what you'd expect from a Donker. Now just look at them bubbles there. That is the sign of a really good brewer, because when you've got uniform, tightly packed bubbles like that, that's a really good sign. That shows that the brewmaster who's done this knows what they're doing. Anyway, before this head dissipates completely, I'm going to give this a go. Bottoms up. That's nice. That is really nice. That is the difference between a double and a Brune or a Donker. With the double, and the ABVs may be the same, but with the doubles you do tend to get, in a lot of them, some ethanol coming through. I'm not really getting any ethanol on that whatsoever. And in fact, even though this is a top fermented beer, it's putting me in mind of quite a strong Doppelbock, almost like an old ale stroke barley wine, that type of flavour. And it's nice. There's some carbonation on it. It's not aggressive, and it's got more in common with a German style, I would say a Doppelbock, more than a British old ale, if you know what I mean. Now Doppelbocks can be quite sweet. Whether they add a sweetener to it, I mean, they talk about the Reinheitsgebot, but if you're exporting beer, you are allowed to put sugar in it, and they do tend to come across sometimes as quite sweet. Certainly the Aventus from Weihenstephaner, that's one that does spring to mind, that has got a lot of the characteristics of this beer here. And that's why I like it, to be honest. It's not a diss, if you want to use that word. It's actually a compliment, because this is reminding me a lot of that. The carbonation is just right. It's not aggressive, but it's just enough to know what's going on with the flavour. Pushes it around quite nicely, and I'm quite liking this. But I do like that style, that Belgian Brune style. If it was a toss-up between a triple and something like this, a Brune, I'd always go for the darker colour beer. In fact, I'm going to stick my neck out here and say I prefer darker coloured beers to lighter coloured beers in general. Now, whether you class Weizen or wheat beers as a light coloured beer, they're sort of orangey. You probably would be erring on the side of light beer, but this is my thing. That big, very malty, big dark fruit, some sweetness, a little hop character on the finish. That's me. That's what I do. That's why I like barley wine. It's why I like Doppelbocks. It's why I like Icebock. It's why I like Dunkels as well. And of course, if we're talking Belgian stuff, it's why I like the doubles. It's why I like the Brunes, and it's why I like the Donkers. And if we're talking British, then it's why I like bitters. It's why I like ruby ales. It's why I like old ale, and it's why I like barley wine. Porter and stout. Yeah, okay, not bad. I mean, that's the extreme of dark beers, but yeah, this is my thing. This is what I like. Your IPAs and your certainly your modern craft stuff, not massively. This is what does it for me. This type of beer here, and this is a very good example, I have to say. And it's been going since 2005, so it's a relatively new beer, but it tastes great. This may put some people off. That candy sugar could be interpreted by your sort of novice beer drinker, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but your average beer drinker, they would say that's very syrupy and cloying and rich. But you can't have a pint mentality when you're drinking these type of beers. Hence the reason they put them in these little dumpies, 330ml dumpies. You drink it out of a chalice and you don't fucking neck it. Because even though it's 6.5%, believe me, if you have a lot of these and you drink them like lagers, you're going to get very sick of them quite quickly, because that sugar is not for everyone, even for me. I mean, I would say that 3 pints of that, and that's six of these, would be about my limit. I think after that I would be very, very, how would I put it, just sugar overload, if you know what I mean, because it is quite prevalent in this, that candy sugar, but it complements it perfectly, you know. And if you're drinking this as like a degustation beer, this is absolutely brilliant. I do like this. Lovely. Big malt character on that, caramel malt. In fact, you've got some little notes of toffee on that. Then you've got obviously your candy sugar. No ethanol to speak of. I'm not really getting the ethanol coming through here, which is a little bit unusual for Belgian beer. I normally expect a little seam of ethanol at least, but not really getting that. Yeah, as I just mentioned, the sugar's there, but you will also get a little bit of the hop character on the finish. There's a little bitterness to it right at the end, which is really nice. And all in all, if you like German Doppelbocks, you're going to like that. So what's the verdict on Valeir Donker from the Brouwerij Conteras? Well, yeah, it's a good one. I've had to put Percy out. I don't know what he's doing. He's just gone into one down there, but he's out the door. This is a nice one, and as I said at the start of this video, this is one of my favourite Belgian styles, and it's not one that's really, I wouldn't say not appreciated, but it's not that as popular over here as the singles, the blondes, if you like, the doubles and the triples, even the quadruples as well. But these are very underrated beers, and if you are a fan of Doppelbock, if you're a fan of British beer as well, like the old ales, like, you know, Theakston's Old Peculiar, they do have a lot in common. In fact, they've got more in common than they have differences. So if that's your thing, you're going to like this. And this is a really good example. It's not the best, don't get me wrong, but it is good. I really do like this. There's no hint of sourness on it. Sometimes you do get a little hint of sourness. These these Flemish brewers do tend to add a little touch of sourness onto some of these darker beers. I'm not talking about Flemish red ale here. I'm just talking about these Bruins or Donkers. You do sometimes get a little hint of sourness on that. I'm not sure whether that's intentional or whether that's just spontaneous fermentation that's gone on. But this is good, and I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I like it that much. And that's about average for this style of beer for me. And as I said earlier in the previous section, Doppelbock, Bruins, as far as European beers go, they're my kind of thing. Icebox, well, you know, that's the extreme of the dark beers in terms of ABV. It's on a par with the quadruples and whatnot. But yeah, this is a very underrated style, and even if you don't manage to pick some of this up, I got this from Beers of Europe, but if you don't manage to pick any of this up, check out Belgian Bruins. They really are good. And if there's certain flavours in Belgian beers that you don't like, certainly the ethanol, in a lot of these Bruins you don't get that huge seam of ethanol that you do sometimes get in doubles, certainly not in the quadruples as well. But it's nice, so I'm going to give that, and look at the head retention on that and the lacing, that is superb. Yeah, that's a well worthy solid 8.5 out of 10. That's definitely recommended. Check out Beers of Europe, quite cheap. I think it was about £3, a little over £3. It's worth it though. There are some good ones. That's worth, if you like that style of beer, that's worth it. And remember, beer is working class champagne.